Hello, and welcome back to Fusion Writing, where building character meets creating structure. This is Tuesday, our map session, and it's our Zettelkasten week. Week 3 of the month is where we talk about how we use our Zettelkasten to help us in our fiction writing. And boy, do we have an action-packed show for you today. And without any further ado, I'm going to let Victoria take it away because she has all of her notes from day one when she was first starting her Zettelkasten for fiction. Pretty amazing, huh? Okay, Victoria.
All right, guys, here we go. So I'm going to go kind of fast, jump in and swim with me, but we're going to get you through this process of how to get started. That's probably the question that I get the most often is, how do I get this thing started? So here's the inside scoop. When I started my Zettelkasten, I always knew that it was a tool to serve getting my novel written. So my first principle was I needed a way to organize all of the notebooks, the journals, the notes. You have to consider, I started writing this book in 1996. Now I'm dating myself. I was working as a security guard and I had the time to do it. Well, then life derailed me and it all got shelved. So when I came back to this process at the end of 2021 and decided to rescue that fledgling book, I had to come up with a way to get all of this information organized in one place and in such a fashion that I could use it all. Well, that's what brought me to Zettelkasten. I did a late night search on YouTube when I was drowning in information and found Scott's videos, and the rest is history. So when I started thinking about the system, I'm a drafter. I can't just dive in and do something. I need to make myself notes and have those conversations internally and then get something on the page so that I have something to work with. That's just my process. So the first thing that I did is I decided to depart from the way Scott instructs making an index. Most people have A to Z cards and they slot in cards alphabetically with the keywords for things they want to get back and find later. And when Kathleen starts taking you deeper into the process, you're going to see what that looks like. But for me, that didn't work. I needed something bigger. I want to see more at a glance than just the keywords on one 4x6 note card. So I chose instead an 8.5 by 11 Happy Planner notebook. That way I can see an 8.5 by 11 view of all of my keywords for any letter of the alphabet. So the way that I chose to organize it was, I just got myself some of those fancy office tabs, tabbed A through Z. I chose the ones that have the gold backing down the hole punch side because it makes them stronger. Because in a Happy Planner, when I punched it with my Happy Planner punch to eliminate the 3 holes that it comes with, I knew I wanted this edge to be strong. So if I want to pull that index page out and work with it independent of my notebook, I can. So that was one custom job that I departed from how Scott teaches you to do it. The reason I tell you that is this is your system. It has to work for your process and how your brain needs to see and do things. I need to see things bigger. I need more room. And I'm a notebook girl. I wanted to somehow incorporate a notebook in my system because I love them so much. So that's personal to me. You do you. That's what I chose. So now I'm going to flip around my little camera view and I'm going to show you my very first baby starts at creating a Zettelkasten. So what you're looking at here is you see that I've written the word index in all caps and marker, and I've just started lining out my characters. So I've got the number 7105 and the name Francis. I've got the number 7110 and the name Tara. So you can look over that little list in your own eye view. But what I was doing is I was starting to figure out, what do I want my main characters' names to be? And where do I want them to go in my box? So more on that later. I'll come back to that. But as I continue down this little drafty page, I've got Branch at 7120. I have his parents. He's my main male character. So again, I was just looking this information over for myself so that I could make a decision about how I wanted to file these main characters that I knew were going to be so important. So then over here, I have a little 7124 category, and it's labeled debate. This is the original novella that I began in 1996 when I first started writing this story. So if I need to get back to that, I just go to my 7124, and all of those characters have a number there. And I've just .1, .2, .3 as I broke them down. So as you can see, the numbering is entirely up to you, but I needed to see it at a high level so I could start to make those decisions about how I wanted it to appear in my index. Now over here, this is really getting into the Wayback Machine, because what you're looking at here, it's labeled Master 7000, The Conjuring Stitch. The Conjuring Stitch is the title for my novel. This was the very first baby notes that I made for how I was going to start to build out that numbering system. So I gave each character a color, and I just made some little bullet lines and started to line out what the characters who are related to that main character might be and what their numbers might be. So I'm not going to go too deep into that. It's pretty self-explanatory, but you can see I did several iterations of how to line out these characters and give them numbers. Now this one, I've tabbed over. Orange is the color for my bad guys. So this was my first list. If I go back to the list I created subsequently, check this out. That is an entire page of all of my bad guys. So you can see what started as this little 3-4 point list became an entire half of a page of bad guys and obstacles. So that's part of how the system grew as I was starting to sketch it out and take a look at what pieces I needed. So the final piece that I will walk you through is labeled up here. It's labeled Numbering System. This is a full 8.5 by 11 page, and I've labeled it according to the academic disciplines, which is how Scott tells you to start. So I've got arts and humanities at 1,000, social science at 2,000, natural science at 3,000, formal science at 4,000, applied sciences at 5,000. Now for me, the 6,000s are quotes, kind of a catch-all random bits of this and that. And then the 7,000s is the number that I specifically assigned for this novel. So everything that has to do with this novel that I'm writing appears under 7,000 somewhere, which is why you may recall when I gave those main characters their numbers, Tara is 7110, Branch is 7120, and I just divided them up and plugged them in. So I'm just going to give you a quick look at some of my categories so you know how I started. So over here under 1100, I've got library and museum sciences, and I've also got personal knowledge management and Zettelkasten. 1110 is Zettelkasten specifically for fiction. This is where I have to plug. That's the book I'm currently writing, which is a nonfiction book. Zettelkasten for fiction, where imagination finds order. What I'm walking you through today is a chapter in that book on how to set up your system. So in that way, should you be interested, you can jot on over to victoriacrowder.com and you can get on the pre-order list so that you're notified when this book comes out. A couple more items that got installed pretty early in the numbering system. 1400 is literature, language, and novel writing. So then let's go to 1620. 1620 is on asemic writing. Asemic writing was a trend started, furthered by Peter Schwenger. And if you can see these scribbles, it's writing a language without actually using letters and words. It's basically creating your own. That plays a key factor in my novel. So that got installed in my Zettelkasten. I don't have anything under my 2000s because I have not read very far into the social sciences. But when it comes to natural sciences, I've got biology and evolution under 3100. When I got to botany, I made that 3200 because I figured that's 100 cards later. That's a good place to stick it. Human biology and death, 3,300. So I'm just labeling those at 100 intervals just so that I've got some space between those cards and they're kind of spread out. There's really no magic to it. You just start sticking numbers in and you follow along. So let's jump over here to, let's see, Under the formal sciences, I've got 4100 is pure math. 4200 is applied math and cryptology. Cryptology figures prominently in my story, so that had to get a number. So then finally, as you know, 7000 is the number assigned to my novel. So I've got 7110 is Tara. She's my main female. 7120 is Branch. He's my main male. 7130 is Fabian. He's one of my antagonists. 7140 is the Voynich manuscript, which figures prominently. 7150 is embroidery, which figures prominently. So you can see that's just 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. I just spaced them what I felt like was a good distance apart, which gave me spaces in between, so that as I developed my system further along, I just start plugging those things in between the numbering system that I sketched out. So this is the original page from which I started creating my cards and installing them over in my note box. This is still exactly the same as it was, but it's grown a whole bunch from here, because tomorrow my task is I have new boxes coming, I have new cards coming, and I'm migrating out of my small box into my bigger boxes. So I hope that was helpful. I am going to remind you, get on the pre-registration list for when the Zettelkasten for fiction is released. I would love to share it with you. And definitely pop over to LiLLiPub. That's where we discuss all of these things that we're covering, and we look forward to hearing you chime in and tell us your challenges, your successes, and how are you setting up and using your system. That's what we want to hear about. So with that, I'm going to throw the ball over to Kathleen and let her take it away.
Okay, thank you so much, Victoria. Well, Victoria is such a wonderful historian that she keeps all of her information and her records, and I could learn an awful lot from her. So you bet I'm going to scoot on over to victoriacrowder.com and put my name on that pre-order list, because I sure want her book. So what you're going to get from me today is the categories that I actually use, and you're going to see a category list, which you can also pick up as your handout for this week, and you're going to see some actual cards. And I'll show you a little bit about how I use my cards to track my writing, because I don't write my stories onto the cards. I like to use a yellow legal pad, and I'll show you how I go back and forth between the card and the legal pad to track what I'm doing. So I'm going to switch over to my down-facing camera so that I can show you some specifics. Okay, here's my down-facing camera. So Victoria started out with the index, so I'm going to start out showing you my index. My index is a more traditional. It never occurred to me, I do not have that level of creativity that Victoria had amazingly to come up with a full page index. So my index is these cards, and they range A to Z with my little dividers and certain letters of the alphabet. First of all, not surprisingly, the letter S had to get broken down into littler clumps because otherwise it's too hard to handle them. My T's are desperately in need of that treatment. They were getting way too fat. But what I put on my index card is information about usually the entire, this information will be about my general knowledge, mostly. My cards, I have a whole separate range for my creative writing, and most of the cards in my system are based on the areas of research that happen to fascinate me, which right now I'm totally fascinated by the concept of human emotion and human motivation. And that's how I got into that from the interesting idea of trying to create a course, which is up there on YouTube, for how someone who only has little bits of time can write successfully in those small bits and still maintain emotional consistency across the story. So it was a practical, almost an engineering question. And so that was going on alongside the time that I was also interested in psychology and human motivation. So most of the cards in my system are actually research cards. And I include a whole phrase that brings back the entire card. Since that's not about fiction, I won't go any deeper on that other than to say, yes, mine is the more traditional index card method, and you can see what that looks like. What I want to specifically share with you today, and this is your handout that you can pick up over at LiLLiPub. There's two handouts. This one is the more detailed one for our Tuesday. And this will give you the categories that I ended up with. And I will show you the cards that go along with them. I ended up using Scott Shepherd's number categories, but I didn't like the idea of giving 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 to those categories because I felt that they would not be well utilized. There would be a lot of just stuff I never got to. So I made 1,000 through 5,000 my own categories, and I took my 6,000s and went with 6,100, 6,200, 6,300 for Scott's categories. So all my general knowledge, this just purely general knowledge, is stuffed in there. So my area that is devoted to all of my creative writing is in my 4,000 area. I reserved 4,100 for personal reflection, my meditation notes. I love Haley's book on soul cards. I love Mel Jeffcoat's book. They both involve notes in meditation on meditations, and that's where those go. 4,200 for me is just random thoughts and ideas that aren't necessarily about fiction writing. They might be projects that are nonfiction that I'm thinking of. And now 4,300 starts my fiction area. And for me, the whole 4,300 section is what I call fabulous fragments. It's where I can gather ideas that don't attach to anything necessarily, but I can grab them and have a place to put them. So my 4310 is characters, 20 is locations and scenery, 30 is history and backstory, 40 is idea for the message that I want to get across in my story, and 4350 is ideas for story arcs or for plots. Then starting with 4,400 is my first project. Well, it turns out that 4,400 for me was teaching my class, Reawaken the Dream of Writing, my 35-week class. So my fiction piece that I'm working on right now, which is called Jonathan and the Dinosaur Notebook, begins at 4,500. And so if I write a book after that, it would be 4,600, 4,700, all the way up. And if I got to 4,900 and still had another book in me, well, I hope so, it would be 4A00. And I just start using the letters of the alphabet, 4B00, 4C00. So this can go for me through many different works of fiction. But just like the 4,300 fabulous fragments, I use those same breakdowns, characters, locations, etc. So that no matter what story I'm writing, I already know that my 10s are going to be my characters. So let's take a look at the characters because they're a lot of fun. My characters I use a dot and then I use a number. And I start with 01 because who knows how many characters you're going to get. And I just start assigning my characters. You can see from Victoria's list, she's got way more bad guys than I've got total characters. She's way farther along on hers than I am on mine. But one of the things I want to share with you is how I actually track my writing. Now, I have here in my character section on Jonathan, I have a card for my character profile for Jonathan. I've got a card for the story and the backstory. And one of the things that I want to share with you is how I track the writing itself, Jonathan, the story. And I keep a card for the little fragments of writing that I do. And on the back side, I indicate which one of my legal pads this particular story idea comes from. So here is a section that's called Jonathan in the Girly Bedroom, and it's in my legal pad D14. Well, I pulled that one off the shelf. Each one gets a number. I'm working on 26 right now, so this was a while ago. I got stalled out on Jonathan. And I keep them in these folders so that they won't get dinged up and icky. So I've turned to this page, Jonathan in the Girly Bedroom. And what I want you to notice is that I indicate here what card it came from. And on here, I indicate what notepad and page it came from. So that way I can always go back and forth with everything I've written, even though this was written in 2023, back in almost a year ago, August of 2023, I can get to it in a wink from this card. And I think that's one of the most important things for me about keeping a Zettelkasten, is that I can capture in this way everything that I've written. What I want you to understand from that is that you have all the flexibility in the world in how you want to set up your own Zettelkasten. These are just ideas for you. I'm going to send it back over to Victoria to sum us up.
That was amazing. I hope as you guys follow us through these modules, you're really understanding how there's an infinite number of ways to get this done, but we all have the same goal, which is to get the writing done, to get the work done. So in this single module, you have been given a bird's eye view from the very beginning inklings of how to start a system so that it will serve your writing, all the way through to how Kathleen showed you, log your drafts on your cards, keep that cross-referencing tight and indexing so that you can always find things quickly, and you will never be lost again. That is the true value behind why we're doing this and why we're so passionate about it. At the end of the day, if you can't find your material quickly, if you can't find your way back to the things that you were thinking or working on or noodling about in your drafts, then all is lost. You have to reinvent the wheel every time you sit down to write. And who has time to do that? So just in this module, you've been given a look at the entire process and one set of ways that it can serve you, even though we do it very differently. So please join us over in LiLLiPub. We would love to hear from you, especially those of you that are just starting out. Let us know what your troubles or your challenges are, because between us, we've probably already solved 90% of them. And the ones that we haven't, we would be happy to dive into with you. So thank you for joining us. We always appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time.
Well, thank you, Victoria. Remember, join us on lillipub.org from now through the rest of the week. Actually, we're there 7 days a week. And be sure to join us for our Zoom call on Saturday, where we share writing and we just get together and we have a wonderful time. So join us on lillipub.org, and we will see you next week for our writing week. So till then, bye-bye.
Thank you. See ya.